It all ended and began with a trial.
Order! Order! I will have order! No, the defendant will not speak. The defendant has said enough during these proceedings. We are not here to discuss your crimes anymore, but to deliver our verdict. So sit down before you are seated forcibly. Ladies and gentlemen of Goldrock City, the Alang Council has finished its deliberations regarding defendant's crimes against our nation and has come to the following conclusion. The defendant is hereby found guilty of all charges pressed by the council members during this trial. What the defendant has done was clearly a breach of our ancient tradition and an act of greed and malevolence aimed at enriching the defendant without regard for other lives, even at the cost of undermining the stability of our state. The cry of outrage from other councillors is most certainly justified, but, in accordance with traditions of survivors of the Great Flood, we in Goldrock City still consider human life to be sacred, which is the only reason we are not sentencing the defendant to death. However, such crimes cannot be unpunished, and so the court and council have decided that the defendant shall be banished from the city and forever barred from entering its walls. Additionally, all defendants' possessions and land holdings within the city shall be confiscated and distributed evenly to those harmed by his schemes and machinations. Bailiff, sit the defendant down before I add aggravated assault to the list of charges. Use a gag if you must. Now then, I hereby declare that the defendant shall be removed from the city this instant, delivered to the port and placed on Captain Savim's ship. I believe she has business in Neverdin, so she can drop off this traitor there. The records say that they can sustain one more person. Guards, escort this criminal outside the gates, and know that if you are spotted on the island at next sunrise, your sentence will be extended. This trial is over. Now get out of my sight.
Yeah, right. Trial. Crimes. Bunch of bastards, the whole load of them. The only thing I did was the exact same thing they do, just without being part of one of their star-forsaken corrupt families. Ah, you never been there, didn't you? Well, you know how it goes. Every place has its people in power. Estrin has its queen, sequestered in her hilltop castle. Easterners have their head priests, the Kanushi, or something like that, overlooking them from the top of his cliff. And we in Alang, we have our council, formed centuries ago by survivors of the Great Flood. Used to be that council was elected every few years to make sure right people were in charge, but over the past 200 or 300 years it's been pretty much dominated by 7 families, with house ghouls solid in them. And let me tell you, these families hate competition, so to them a commoner like me, who got to own a bit of land and money thanks to my own work, was the greatest affront possible. And that's why they framed me into this scandal, just to take what I had for themselves and keep the status quo. And there was fuck all I could do to prevent it. The moment council branded me as a criminal, no one would do business with me. Hell, no one would even dare to look my way as to not attract the ire of the big families. I could be lying on the ground, dying, and no one would help, because council could learn about it and associate whoever helped with me and ruin their lives just like they ruined mine. So I had to go, for my own sake, and for the sake of precious few associates I still had at this point. Luckily, the captain of the guard still owed me a favour, so when his men kicked me outside of the gates, they at least didn't toss me into the ocean and gave me a day to call on some favours and get at least some of my money out. The families might have confiscated everything I owned within the city walls, but when they first sent their goons to threaten me, I managed to hid some money away with a friend in the docks. Not much, but enough for a new start. Or so I hoped. Anyway, I grabbed the money I saved and went to meet this Captain Savim. If I missed her ship and the guards would find me in the town next day, they'd have to hang me from the walls. So I got myself to the dock, where I saw an old cargo ship docked there, with a middle-aged lady at the helm, shouting at some dockhands, demanding them to load up the cargo faster. Now, later I've learned that she wasn't actually that much older than me, just a few years of difference, as she was in her late 30s. Certainly looked twice that age though, thanks to the life spent on the sea and in the wind and in the sun. On that day, though, I didn't really care much about any of that. To me, she was just a person about to carry out my sentence and banish me to some insignificant rock in the middle of nowhere. And she knew I was coming, no doubt. A courier from the council already informed her of the vile criminal she was about to deliver to his lifelong sentence far away from home. So I expected to be welcomed with open hostility. Turns out, Captain Savim was not a person I was expecting. "Ahoy there, landlubber! I guess you're the one going for an unplanned trip to the outer islands, eh?" she said with a smile, as soon as she noticed me lingering on the dock next to her ship. I nodded and introduced myself. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Good timing, we're almost done loading. There's some crates next to the office over there. Mind bringing them along? Should make this all the quicker." I did as she asked, already cursing my luck. Manual labor, a mere few hours after my sentence. Fortunately, the crates were not too heavy, so bringing them on board wasn't too much of an issue. "Right, now be a dear and get them below decks, would ya? Just watch your step, I really need to tidy up the place a bit," the captain said, and as I was loading everything, she unmoored the ship and we went underway. Came back on deck just in time to take a look at the walls of the city that would never be my home again. "Sorry for the rush, but I've got a bunch of cargo to deliver and not that much time. Now, technically they wanted me to keep you below decks, as befits an exiled prisoner, but you already seem to be a bit green in the face, so staying on deck should do you some good. Weather's decent, so go to the bow and just sit there and catch some wind if you want. We should be getting to Neverdin by tomorrow, maybe even tonight if the wind's good." I was grateful for not treating me like trash, so I thanked her, and then I had to ask her to clarify something. "The bow," she said, rolling her eyes. I forget that some of you city dwellers are complete landlubbers. The bow is the front. Oh, and on your way there, mind unfurling the sail there?" "Do the what now?" I asked, baffled. To me, this floating contraption was something overly complicated and to be afraid of. "Oh, for star's sake," the captain sighed, but she did so with a smile. "Grab that winch on the mast and release it so that the sail falls down, so we can actually get some speed, unless you want us to spend a week on the waves. That's right, good job. See, wasn't hard. Now stay there if you want, just make sure you don't fall out. If a ship starts to shift too much to starboard, go to port side, or the other way around." She noticed my confused look and rolled her eyes again. "Starboard is right, port is left." "Then why can't you just say so?" "Honestly, I have no sodding clue. My dad always said sailors invented those names to confuse land dwellers." "I don't see any other reason. But alright, I'll try to not get in your way." She nodded and focused on steering the wooden thing for a while. Took us a few minutes to even leave port, after which she pointed the ship somewhere towards the open sea and said, "Righto, I'm going to sleep. This has been a long few days. Wake me up if you see land or if there's a storm coming." I haven't seen a storm in months, but that wasn't what confused me. As soon as she finished talking, I rushed to her with questions. What did she mean she was going to sleep? Shouldn't be keeping an eye on the ship and, steer it? "I already did," she answered. "Pointed it where we need to go, and now we actually need to get there, which will take hours. So I may as well sleep off the last few nights, eh? No, please, just go find yourself something to do and don't bother me unless we're about to crash into something." And with that, she went below deck, leaving me confused and surrounded by water. I wanted to see if I could maybe try and turn the ship around, but even touching the steering wheel seemed like a recipe for disaster, so I just sat there close to it and waited. Now, it's been a rough few weeks for me as well, so even though I was terrified that the ship would suddenly sink or be taken away by sea monsters, I must have fallen asleep after a while. When I woke up, we were already sliding into port of Neverdin, if a single pier can be called a port. It was late, so I helped Captain Savim unload her ship, the least I could do for being kind to me on this trip, and waved her goodbye as she left. Asked if it was a good idea to set sail in the middle of the night, but she said she had packages to deliver and set sail. Never saw her again, but wherever she is, I hope she is doing fine. As for my stay at Neverdin, Well, it quickly became clear that it wouldn't be pleasant. The local population was 37, living in a few cramped huts and small dugout caves underneath a big rock that dominated the island. When I found the local magistrate in the morning, he wasn't too happy to see me. Turns out the population limit imposed by the council was 38, so my arrival meant that no one else could move in, or no kid could be born, and some families were decidedly not happy about it. You know how it is. Ain't that much land to go around after the Great Flood, so each island can only sustain so many people, and it's the one law everyone actually follows to the letter, and the council enforces it with all the power they can muster. And it makes sense, as sad as it is. Go over the limit and there won't be any food to feed everyone, and things will only get worse from there. We all know what happened when Estrin revoked their limit a few decades ago. Our fleet has to go out there and sink their refugees before they aid themselves. But that wasn't the main problem, not for me at least. A day after my arrival, a courier sailed in from Gold Rock from the council, and told the locals why I was exiled. Needless to say, when they weren't happy to see me in the morning, in the evening they became downright hostile, with village kids and idiots throwing rocks at me wherever I went. I got kicked out of the tiny room I rented in one of the houses and had to sleep on the ground near the large rock. And when I went to buy some food in the morning, I realized that the few local merchants increased the prices 100-fold for me. The council bastards wouldn't execute me, sure. They just slowly starved me to death away from their precious golden city. Within a week, my funds ran out almost completely, and it was increasingly impossible to do anything. I came to Neverdin hoping to rebuild my business, but no one was willing to even talk to me, let alone work on some project. The only person that wasn't openly hostile was a local Sailwind company liaison, and he was the main reason I even survived that week, as he sold me food and water at normal prices. I asked him about it one day, when we were sitting on the beach with a bottle of wine. I wondered if he wouldn't get in trouble with the council for disobeying their orders, but he just laughed it off. Ha! The council has no power over me, or the company in general. They need us, and they know if they anger us, we'll take our business elsewhere. Happened with the previous high priest in the east few decades ago. He demanded that all our captains doing business in the Emerald Archipelago had to pay a tithe to the local temple. So the company board showed him a middle finger and pulled all the ships back here into Estrin for a few months. And would you believe it, the Easterners were very quick to find themselves a new, more reasonable head priest. It was indeed some story, and I even knew that the company had a fair bit of influence around the world. I didn't know much about their inner workings though, so I asked. Well, we have office liaisons like myself on every island, getting delivery contracts to and from people. Boring job, really, cause it's mostly just waiting on some ship to arrive and keeping track of the warehouse. And aside from that, we have 31 captains, sailing all over the archipelagos, delivering goods and people where they need to go, and keeping the world connected. Not that many trees around, so we tend to grab whatever we can and maybe be able to build ourselves a new boat every few decades. Even with that though, we mostly sail ancient ships passed across generations. The Captain Savim that brought you here? Yeah, her ship was built by her great-grandfather and passed on through her family. And, well, sometimes one of our captains goes out there for a long trip across the ocean and never returns, so we sometimes lose both experienced sailors and their ships. But, well, part of the job, I guess. But yeah, right now we have 31 people sailing around out there. He stared into the waves for a few moments, and then asked me a question that changed my life. Maybe you'd like to become a 32nd one? Naturally, I laughed it off at first. I had zero experience with sailing, and most importantly, no ship, so I wondered how exactly did he want me to become a sailor, but the man clearly had this idea all planned out. Well, you could always stay here and let village idiots pelt you with rocks every day and slowly starve to death. Or you could buy a boat, from me, and learn how to sail it. We got a little though for sale. One of our captains met some lady here on the island and decided to settle down, so he sold his boat and bought a coconut farm. I tried asking the locals if some of them would like to try their hand at sailing, but let's be honest, people around Neverdin are not exactly the shiniest examples of human beings. Pretty much leaves you. And hell, from what you said about your situation, this is probably your only chance to not starve here on this island in the coming week. I wondered if I could actually afford the boat he mentioned, but he waved it off. Worry not, my friend. It's more important to get us a captain out there fulfilling contracts. Just pay what you can and we'll call it even. In reality, the dough still costed me almost all of my money, but the office man was right. Staying on Neverdin was a slow death sentence, so I had to go. And so, next morning I met him on the dock to watch my new purchase. It's, wasn't anything spectacular. Calling it a ship would be too generous. It was more of a large boat with just a single sail, like a smaller cousin of Captain Savim's ship. Still, the Sailwind man was kind enough to provide some basic necessities, a compass, some food and water, and a map. He also, I noted, brought in a bunch of crates with him and loaded them onto the dough. Right so, my friends, you're in luck. Got me a bit of delivery contact to Alnilem in the north, so you're gonna go and make your first money right away? No, the cargo has to be there in 2 days, so you'd better get a move on. Get a move on? I don't even know how to sail this thing, I shouted, but he already unmoored the boat and kicked it off the pier. With a sinking feeling of terror, I realized that I was now sailing, without even a single idea how to do it. I threw in a bit of an instruction manual there, friend, the company liaison shouted behind me. Read it and you'll be fine. Just sail straight north. Gave you a compass, use it. And that is how I became a sailor in employ of Sailwind Company. They say it's best to learn on the job, but I really wish I had at least some time to train before he kicked me out to sea. Still, there was nothing else to do now but to figure it out, so, quite literally, I had to learn the ropes. I still remember how terrified I felt back then, how every wave filled me with overwhelming fear for my life. I could sink myself at any moment, I thought, so I never even approached the railings on my boat and did everything I could to stay in the middle. I checked the compass like a madman every few seconds, afraid that I somehow got blown off course, and I almost lost consciousness because I was too afraid to go to sleep. Decided to finally drop the anchor in the middle of the night and curl into the ball on the deck, but I barely slept at all, too scared that I'd just drift somewhere into open sea and end up lost forever. To be honest, that last part still scares me every time. Every time I wake up, I panic for a few moments. Am I still sailing? Is the ship taking water? Am I still on course? It would really help to have some help on board, but, well, not many people want to leave their islands to brave the endless waves. Eventually, though, I reached Alnilem where I unloaded my cargo, and then, when the company man there asked me if I wasn't willing to make a delivery to the academy, I realized that, from now on, that was my life. If I wanted to have food to put in my stomach, I had to keep sailing. And so, I did as he asked, though, I have to say, that trip to the academy was even more terrifying than the previous one. Never been there before, couldn't afford proper education, but I expected something more than just a tiny rock with a few buildings in the middle of nowhere. Shows how valuable land is. Even though Academy Island is barely larger than my ship, it had freshwater spring, so people found a way to live there. And then I went back to Gold Rock City where, just as the man who hired me said, the fact that I was exiled no longer mattered when the guards learned that I was working for the company. They still wouldn't let me inside the walls, but at least now I could do my business there again, and so I did. Now that was 2, maybe 3 years ago now, and now I'm here, far away from home, although... No, actually I'm not far away at all. My home is actually just there, docked in the port. If someone told me before I'd enjoy life as a sailor, I'd probably laugh them off and tell them that it would be too boring. But now I don't think I'd change it back for my old home in the Gold Rock City. Sure, it's not the most exciting lifestyle, except for those moments where it's absolutely terrifying, and it's certainly not for everyone, but I came to enjoy it. I learned a lot of new things, saw a great many new places, and some things that, to this day, I'm not really sure really happened. And I earned a decent bank in the process, but most importantly, I'm free out there, without masters lording over my life. Just me, my ship, the wind and the sea. I must be boring you with my mariner talk. Tell you what, you can have the rest of this bottle of rum as compensation for listening to my drivel. But if I caught your attention, the office is right there. Ask them and they may find you ship as well. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be setting sail. I'll have deliveries to make, and a horizon to chase.